couple of years ago, my grandma passed away. She'd lived alone for a long time, and after she was gone, I kept thinking about how hard that must have been for her. I felt guilty for not visiting more. And honestly, I just missed having someone to talk to who actually listened. That's probably why, when I moved to a new city for work, I signed up for this volunteer program where you check in on seniors who don't have family around. It was mostly just running errands, helping with groceries, or sitting and talking for an hour or two. I liked it. It made me feel useful, and it was a good distraction from my own life, which was kind of a mess at the time. I'm not going to say exactly where this happened, just because I don't want anyone trying to track down the house or the guy's family. Some things are better left alone, you know. Most of the people I visited were sweet, if a little lonely. Some just wanted to talk about their kids or show me old photos. But then the coordinator called and asked if I could take on a new client, Mr. Avery. She said he was blind, lived alone, and didn't have any family. She also said he was a little different, but she didn't really explain what that meant. The first time I went to his house, and I almost turned around and left. It was this old two-story place at the end of a dead-end street, with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds. The porch creaked under my feet, and when I knocked, I heard shuffling inside before the door swung open. Mr. Avery was in his late 70s, thin and bony, with wild white hair and a beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in months. His eyes were cloudy and unfocused, but he moved like he knew exactly where everything was. He didn't smile or say hello, just stepped aside and told me to come in. The house was dark and smelled like old books and something sour, maybe mold. There were stacks of newspapers everywhere, and the curtains were always drawn. The first thing I noticed was the camera, a beat-up old Polaroid that he kept on a table by the door. He picked it up and handed it to me, asking if I could load the film. His hands shook a little, but his voice was steady. He told me he liked to take pictures because it helped him remember things. I thought it was kind of sad, but also impressive that he managed on his own. He told me he'd been blind since his 30s, but he'd learned to do everything himself. He cooked, cleaned, even fixed things around the house. He said he didn't need help, just someone to talk to and maybe help with the camera. Every visit was the same. I'd load the film, and he'd wander around the house, snapping pictures at random. He'd ask me to describe what was in them, and I'd do my best. It's the living room. There's a chair, a lamp, the window. He'd nod and smile, but sometimes he'd ask, "Is there anyone else in the picture?" I always said no, just the room. But he'd just laugh, this weird, dry laugh that made me uncomfortable. One day, he asked me to organize his photo albums. There were hundreds of Polaroids, all labeled with dates and little notes in Braille. Most were just shots of the house, living room, kitchen, backyard. But in almost every photo, there was this dark, blurry shape somewhere in the background. Sometimes it was by the window, sometimes in a doorway, sometimes just a shadow on the wall. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light or maybe his finger over the lens. But the more I looked, the more it started to freak me out. The shape was always there, and in some of the newer photos, it looked more like a person. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with long hair and a pale face, always just out of focus. I didn't say anything to Mr. Avery, but I started to feel uneasy in the house, like I was being watched. Mr. Avery started talking more about his past. He told me he'd had a wife and a daughter, but his daughter died when she was little. He said he missed her so much it made him crazy. He started talking about trying things to bring her back. At first I thought he meant therapy or something, but then he started talking about rituals, sacrifices, and the old ways. He said he'd found a group of people who promised they could help him see his daughter again. He'd get this wild look on his face when he talked about it, like he was excited and scared at the same time. He told me about drawing symbols on the floor, lighting candles, and chanting in the dark. He said his wife couldn't take it and left, but he kept going. He said, You'd be surprised what you can do if you want something bad enough. One afternoon, I was helping him clean out a closet when I found a box full of weird stuff. Old candles, scraps of paper with strange symbols, and a small dried-up animal skull. I asked him about it, and he just grinned and said, "Some things are better left alone. But you're curious, aren't you? That's good. Curiosity is what keeps us alive." After that, I started to dread going to his house. He'd ask me to stay later and later, always saying he had something to show me. One time, he asked me to help him set up candles in a circle in the living room. He said it was for her, and that if I was lucky, I might get to meet her. I made up an excuse and left early that day. The last time I saw him, he was different. He seemed more agitated, pacing around the house and muttering to himself. He asked me to take a picture of him sitting in his favorite chair. I did, and when the photo developed, I felt my stomach drop. The shadowy figure was right behind him, clearer than ever, a little girl. Her face twisted in a way that made me feel sick. He took the photo from me and ran his fingers over it, smiling. He said something about her being close, and that I should stay. But I just wanted to get out of there. I left and never went back. The program called a few weeks later to say Mr. Avery had passed away in his sleep. They asked if I wanted any of his thing, but I said no. I heard later that when they cleaned out the house, they found dozens of Polaroids, all with that same shadowy figure, and a circle of melted candles in the living room. I don't know what he brought into that house, but I hope it stays there. Back when I lived in Cleveland, I used to volunteer at a homeless shelter a couple nights a week. It was in this old church basement on the east side, not the best part of town. But honestly, it was one of the only places that would take anybody in, no questions asked. I started doing it after college, mostly just to feel like I was doing something that mattered, you know? My job at the time was just data entry, so I needed something that felt real. The shelter was always a little too cold, and the lights flickered a lot. The regulars mostly kept to themselves, just grateful for a hot meal and a place to crash. You'd get to know some of them, and sometimes you'd hear stories that would stick with you for days. Every now and then, someone new would show up and just kind of blend in, and you'd never see them again. There was this one guy who started coming in late one fall. I never got his name. He was older, gray beard, heavy coat, always looked tired. He never talked to anybody, not even the other guests. He'd just sit in the corner, eat, and then go to bed as soon as the cots were out. The only thing he ever really did was draw. He had this old sketchbook, all beat up, and he'd just sit there for hours, scribbling away. Sometimes I'd see what he was drawing, mostly trees, city streets, faces, but always in black ink, and always kinda rough and dark. I remember one night, I tried to make small talk with him while I was handing out coffee. I asked if he needed anything, or if he wanted a refill, but he just shook his head and kept drawing. I figured maybe he just wanted to be left alone, so I didn't push it. But after a while, I started to notice he'd always sit in the same spot, in the corner by the window, and he'd always keep his sketchbook close, like he was guarding it. One night, I was cleaning up after dinner and I noticed he'd left his sketchbook on his cot. I picked it up, figuring I'd give it back to him the next day. But I'll be honest, I got nosy. I started flipping through it. At first, it was just more of the same, trees, buildings, faces I didn't know. But then I turned to a page and just froze. It was my house, like, no doubt about it. The porch, the weird little window above the door, even the dent in the mailbox. And there was a figure standing out front that looked a lot like me, drawn in that same rough black ink. The next page was even worse. It was a close-up of my bedroom window, with someone standing outside looking in. I just sat there for a minute, trying to convince myself it was just a coincidence. but the details were too spot on. I mean, who else would know about the dent in my mailbox? Or the way the porch light flickers sometimes? I put the sketchbook back on his cot and tried to act normal the rest of the night, but I barely slept. The next day, the guy didn't show up. Actually, I never saw him again after that. I asked around, but nobody knew where he'd gone. I even checked with some of the other shelters, but it was like he just vanished. I tried to tell myself he just moved on, maybe found a different place, but it bugged me. I kept thinking about those drawings. A couple days later, I started noticing weird things at home. Nothing big, just little stuff. My trash can was knocked over one morning, and I found muddy footprints on the back steps. I figured it was just raccoons or maybe some kids messing around, but it still made me uneasy. I started double-checking the locks every night, and then I even put a stick in the window track, just in case. About a week after I found the sketchbook, I came home late from work. It was raining, and I was already in a bad mood. When I got to my front door, I saw something tucked under the doormat. It was another drawing, my house again. But this time, the front door was open, and the figure was gone. There was no note, nothing written on it, just that same rough, black ink. I stood there for a while, just staring at it. I don't know why, but it felt like a warning, or maybe a message. I changed the locks that same night. I even put up a cheap security camera, but I never caught anything on it. The guy never came back to the shelter, and I never saw him around the neighborhood. I still think about it sometimes, especially when I hear a noise outside at night. I keep the drawing in a drawer, just to remind myself to lock up. I don't know what that guy wanted, or how he knew where I lived, but I hope I never find out. I used to help out at a food bank in Dayton, Ohio, mostly on weekends. I started doing it with a couple friends from work, but after a while, I was the only one who kept showing up. I didn't mind though. It was a good way to spend a Saturday, and you got to meet all kinds of people. Some folks would come in every week, some you'd only see once or twice. There was this one woman who started coming in that winter. She was probably in her late 40s, always wore the same big green coat, and had this habit of staring at me a little too long when I handed her a bag of groceries. At first I just thought she was shy or maybe just having a rough time. She never really talked, just nodded and took her food. After a few weeks, I started to notice she'd always get in my line, even if the other lines were shorter. She'd just stand there, staring at me, not blinking, until it was her turn. Sometimes she'd mumble something under her breath, but I could never make out what she was saying. I tried to be friendly, but honestly, she made me uncomfortable. One Saturday, I was closing up and taking out the trash when I saw her standing across the street, just watching the building. She didn't move or wave, just stood there, staring. I tried to ignore it, but when I got in my car, I saw her in my rearview mirror, still standing there, not moving. The next week, she showed up again, but this time, she waited until everyone else had left. I was stacking boxes in the back when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and there she was, just standing in the doorway, holding her grocery bag. She said my name, which I don't remember ever telling her, and then she started talking, fast, like she'd been rehearsing it. She said she thought about me all the time, that she felt like we had a connection, and that she knew I must feel it too. She said she'd been watching me for weeks, and that she'd even seen me outside of the food bank, like at the grocery store and once at the gas station. She said she just wanted to be close to me, and that she'd do anything for me. I didn't know what to say. I tried to be gentle, told her I was just a volunteer and that I didn't think of her that way. I said I was sorry if I gave her the wrong idea, but I really just wanted to help people. Nothing more. Her face changed in an instant. She went from nervous to angry, almost like she was insulted. She said I was lying, that I was just like everyone else. and that I'd regret treating her this way. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. After that, things got weird. I started seeing her everywhere, outside the food bank, across the street from my apartment, even once at the coffee shop where I went before work. She never tried to talk to me again, just stared, sometimes for minutes at a time, like she was waiting for me to say something. I started getting nervous, checking over my shoulder, double-locking my door at night. I even started leaving the food bank with other volunteers, just in case. I know it sounds paranoid, but if you've ever had someone fixate on you like that, you know how it gets in your head. You start to wonder if you're overreacting, or if you're not being careful enough. The last time I saw her was late one night, about a month after that confrontation. I was walking to my car after closing up, and I saw her standing under a streetlight at the end of the block, just watching me. She didn't move, didn't say anything, just stared. I got in my car and drove off, and I haven't seen her since. I still help out at the food bank sometimes, but I always make sure to leave with someone else now. And I never park in the same spot twice. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but honestly, I'd rather be safe than sorry. If you've ever had someone fixate on you like that, you know exactly what I mean.